From the end of World War I, there had been an interest in submarine mine layers in the Royal Navy. But there was considerable debate on the merits of internal versus external mine storage, particularly given they now had some captured German mine layers to play with, who in turn had some rather interesting ideas on this subject. The idea was that in the event of a war, a submarine mine layer would be able to get far closer to enemy ports than a surface ship, which should, in theory, negate, to a degree, the smaller number of mines that a submarine could carry compared to a surface vessel, and these mines, it was hoped, would damage or sink enemy craft on their way out of port, thus weakening an enemy fleet, which would allow the main battle fleet to take care of them far more easily. This was seen as especially useful in the Far East, in the focus against Japan, as Japan had numerous smaller harbours, both on the home islands and on various island bases, which each might be guarded by ships, aircraft and shore batteries, but not, it seemed, by any significant anti-submarine assets. The large submarine M3 would be converted into a mine layer with two long conveyor belts of externally stored mines atop her hull, and from her trials it was decided that external mines meant a smaller and stronger pressure hull, more mines, higher speed during deployment, and a greater number of mines carried. But it also meant that no maintenance could be done on the mines once they were at sea, a slower diving speed, and a limited range of mines that could be carried, as at the time, mines capable of operation in the deep sea could only be carried and set internally. There was also a desire for any future class of submarine mine layer to be able to act as regular submarines to a certain degree after they'd laid their mines, of which they would need to carry at least 40. And so two designs were drawn up, A and B. A was just over 1,500 tons and carried a single line of 40 mines externally, while B was 1,750 tons with the same long line of mines, but the hull was extended with another 40 mines stored in a watertight box outside the pressure hull up front. Once the first set of mines loaded onto the conveyor had been laid, the submarine could surface, presumably in a safe location, and the crew would then move the reserve mines onto the conveyor for another run somewhere else. But both designs were rejected. A was rejected because the conning tower was too far forward, and B was rejected because the box made seakeeping quite difficult and was so bulky that the submarine was extremely obvious on the surface. Given that an internal storage mine layer would need to be far bigger to match either of the design's capacity, that idea was now almost dropped, except for the fact that two new designs came along. C was a modified Rainbow-class submarine, displacing 1,490 tons on the surface with 50 mines carried externally, while D was also a 1,500-ton design with 40 mines carried internally. This surprising number of mines had been accomplished simply by massively reducing the machinery, leaving the poor thing only capable of around 11 knots on the surface. Somewhat understandably, then, the Admiralty went for Design C, ordering a single sub to this specification, HMS Porpoise, which was laid down in 1931. As with most subs, although notionally 1,500 tons or so standard displacement, her actual surface displacement was around 1,750 tons, and just over 2,000 tons when submerged. She had 6 bow torpedo tubes and 1 set of reloads, plus a deck gun and her 50 mines. The next year, another submarine to a slightly modified design was laid down. This was Grampus, and included all her fuel storage being moved internal to the pressure hull, plus an airlock, which, along with another few minor changes, resulted in an increase in displacement and slightly less range, which also led to some people calling the class Grampus class instead of Porpoise class. 2 diesels in both types added up to a total of 3,300 brake horsepower, with 1,600 horsepower electric motors driving 2 screws, giving the subs a top speed on the surface of 15.5 to 16 knots and an underwater speed of around 9 knots. 4 additional subs, for a total of 6, would be ordered one after the other over the course of the 1930s. However, when it came to wartime, most of the class was lost pretty quickly. First to go was Seal, the newest of the class, when in May 1940 she was damaged by, of all things, a mine. After heroic efforts to get her to the surface, she proved to be far too damaged to make it to nearby Sweden and was then captured by the Germans. The next month, Grampus was lost off of Sicily when she was cornered by 4 Italian Speaker-class torpedo boats. Narwhal went the month after that in July when she was caught off of Norway by German aircraft while running on the surface. There was then a bit of a break in losses until a year later when the Cachalot was sunk off North Africa. She'd been spotted by another Italian torpedo boat, but managed to dive in time. But when she surfaced, when she thought it was safe, turned out the Italian ship was still there, and it rammed her when a hatch jammed which prevented her from diving again, although in this case all but one of the crew made it off before she sank. That left Porpoise and Rorqual. Porpoise had a fairly successful war, and in 1944 transferred to the Far East, but she would be lost early in 1945 in the Straits of Malacca when the Japanese managed to triangulate a radio transmission she'd made and then successfully bombed her on the surface with aircraft. It appeared, therefore, that almost all the luck went to Rorqual, which spent the war on something of a killing spree, sinking almost 60,000 tons of shipping, the most of any mine-laying submarine of the war, through a combination of her mines and torpedoes, and damaging quite a bit more. She would also ferry supplies to Malta using her mine storage area, except now filled with watertight supply containers, but as a one-ship class by the end of the war and somewhat worn out by the conflict, she would be sold for scrapping in 1946.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.